Welcome to Beyond the Velvet Rope with Neil Oates Jr., the podcast that takes you on an extraordinary journey into the world of luxury service. Join us as we unlock the secrets, stories, and strategies behind exceptional experiences. From anticipating VIP needs to crafting unforgettable memories, we'll guide you on a path to service excellence in the realm of the affluent. Let's elevate your expertise and redefine the art of world-renowned service. Here's your host, Neil Oates Jr.
Welcome to the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Neil Oates Jr. here, and today's guest is Chase Collins, a financial therapist, money coach, and the author of Trust Your Trust Fund. Raised in a world of privilege, Chase learned early on that wealth without purpose often leads to confusion, shame, and poor decision-making. Instead of following the traditional path of finance, he chose to specialize in the emotional side of money, helping trust fund recipients and high net worth families navigate the complicated intersection of inheritance, identity, and values. Today, Chase works with clients to rewrite their money stories, build financial confidence, and use wealth as a tool for growth, not just status. His work bridges the gap between emotional well-being and financial responsibility, offering a new model for those born into affluence. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. Chase Collins, Beyond the Velvet Rope. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
It is an absolute honor and a privilege to have you on. So I mentioned some things about you, Chase, but what didn't I say that you think might be beneficial for the audience to know about Chase Collins?
Yeah. I think my backstory and kind of my upbringing and the inspiration for why I'm doing what I'm doing is important here. I grew up in Colorado in a small town, and my dad is the inheritor in my story. And the book is dedicated to him, and this whole thing is inspired by him. He unfortunately passed away in 2009. So it really was my first kind of awakening to how inherited wealth can impact somebody negatively. A few years later, his brother, my uncle, also passed away. And it just really opened my eyes to the negative side of inherited wealth and I always say, hidden curses of it. And then the other thing I would like to note as well is, my entire life up until his death, our family was living and provided by his family money and wealth. So I then, after his death, saw my mom really struggle with money and work paycheck to paycheck. So I have a section in my book called Both Sides of the Coin, and it really gave me kind of a wild experience and understanding of money and what it means to have it and not to have it.
Right. So Chase, you said a lot right there. And so we're going to unpack some of that, because I believe that much of my audience, or many of my audience members, they're sitting here and they're like, what do you mean both sides of the coin? And you talk about the negative side of inherited wealth and what that could do. And they're like, no, just let me try to figure that out for myself. Let me be on that learning. Let me be on that other side of the coin. What I want to ask you, right? Very rarely do we get to have conversations with those who have been through or witnessed it firsthand, and then have been able to willingly share what they've learned about the process. So you are where, or your family was where many people, we're going to say, dream of being, right? We want to be on the inherited wealth side, but that was not necessarily your reality. So it's one thing to live an experience, but what really drove you and encouraged you to write Trust Your Trust Fund? Because you could have had that experience, but then just left it there, right?
Yeah.
It's a different human being. It's a different quality of character to say, I saw this, I experienced this, I learned from it. Now let me help others. Why do you do that last part? Let me help others.
That's a great question. It was as I started to receive my own inheritance and come into my adult life that I started to experience similar challenges and notice similar themes as I saw with my dad and my uncle and other family members. And so I had just hit a point where I realized I was almost performing for approval and trying to prove that I deserved the money rather than letting it support who I already was. And the turning point came when I stopped asking, how do I live up to this? And started asking, what do I want my life to be about? And that's when I feel like wealth really shifted from being a weight to a tool. And I realized, I had started to kind of search for resources out there and other people who had been through this and who's talking about this, and nobody's talking about this. There aren't any
No one's
resources.
talking. So Chase, right there, and that's why I want to commend you, right? Because you're not the first person to experience this, but I went looking, searching to see who's in the similar lane, and I was unable
Yeah.
to find. And that's
Yeah.
why I wanted to know what was the switch for you to say, I know I can't be the only one. I know my family can't be the only family.
Yeah.
What about those who are going to come beside me or behind me who are going to experience this? And so
Yep.
you saw the void and you said, oh no, this can't happen to my family, my friends, someone that this can't happen to the future Chase, right?
Yeah.
So you
Yep.
decided to do something about that. And so what was that journey like in experiencing it and then actually deciding to do something about it?
Yeah. It was a wild journey to say the least. I've really gotten every single reaction you could ever imagine from this, and it was hard. It was really hard to talk about it. I avoided going on social media and talking about it, and it really took like radical self-belief and trust that like I have a calling and there's a reason I have the calling and there are people struggling. And yeah, so it's really been like kind of a full circle thing because it really started with like, I'm crazy and also some people telling me I'm crazy. And then also like pushing through and having the belief that there's a reason I'm having this calling, there's a reason I'm having this experience. And it's also kind of what I say to my clients and anybody who has inherited wealth is there's a reason you have inherited wealth. I think a common question is why me and do I deserve this? Absolutely, and there's a reason why you were given this, and it's up to you to do good with it and optimize it and figure out who it is you're called to serve in whatever capacity.
Now, Chase, the audience, they may be listening and they're like, man, these are first world problems. Like, Chase doesn't
Hmm.
have any issues. His clients, they've inherited wealth. But I know that, like, for instance, some of my customers, clients, and I know some of your coaching clients, they're sitting in this weird space, right? Where they're well intended, but they're stuck between entitlement and guilt.
Hmm.
And they're right here and they're saying, okay, let me find resources, can't find any. Then they find Trust Your Trust Fund, they find Chase Collins. What does it look like when they're in that place? And you can talk about this from the first person point of view. What does it
Hmm.
look like when you're saying, okay, yes, I do have this, I deserve it, but then also a second later you're like, do I deserve it? Why me? Right? Could you share that emotional balance or counterbalance there?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of different aspects come into that right there. I think the experience can be very isolating and make you feel like very alone. It's really just like a whole um like roller coaster of emotions and back and forth of like what am I doing? What is this for? Do I deserve this? And then the next moment you can like feel that kind of passion and intuition and like drive to maybe do something and feel inspired to do something. And I think the tricky part about like having inheritance and when the bills are paid, you actually don't have the driver motivation to continue on or to really maybe put in the hard work if it's something you're doing like independently or if
Right.
you're an entrepreneur. So, it's really a tricky balance emotionally and it really brings up so many different things. I've seen lots of guilt and shame and
Yeah.
the pressure of family expectation, the pressure of societal expectation, then assumptions, societal assumptions, and really like the most important thing is to tune that out.
Okay, so I do want to add some background of what you shared already. So you said that your dad was the inheritor, but then
Yes.
he passed away, you said in '09, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep.
And so I don't want to make any assumptions, but you look like a young man, right? So
Yes.
if you would you be willing to share how old were you when your father passed away?
Yeah, I was 11.
Okay. And so you say that your father passed away when you are 11 years old. And so
Hmm.
the experience for young Chase to then being to seeing mom having
Hmm.
to do some different things, you really did have the unique experience of not seeing life here to begin with and then work its way up. It was sort of inverted for you. Is that fair to say,
Hmm.
where you saw it here and then you had to experience things at a different way? What was that experience like for you?
It was it's definitely shaped me into the person I am today and shaped, I think the courage that I have to step out and talk about this and like create what I've created. But I'm the oldest boy. I do have two older sisters, but I'm the oldest boy, and my older sisters are quite a bit older. So at the time, my sister was graduating high school when my father passed away. It was her last week of high school, and so technically, I was the oldest kid in the house, and the oldest boy in general. I immediately started to feel like the pressure of money and like my mom's money worries and stress like trickle down to me pretty quick. And it, I was never really a good student in that traditional school setting, but it really did affect me in my school journey. And I kind of just checked out because I like realized like I'm processing and dealing with such bigger real life issues than like my sixth grade like language arts class,
Yeah.
that I just really struggled, and so yeah, and then I think just it's my siblings and I talk about it that it's somewhat of our biggest blessing that we got to experience that with my mom and watched her experience that struggle and the stress and the paycheck to paycheck and moving and rent and all that stuff, because without that I don't think we would have such an understanding of like the value of a dollar and like I said, both sides of the coin.
So Chase, I want to ask you, you've mentioned it here, but then I know you also mentioned this in Trust Your Trust Fund book. You are a big believer, and you've said that wealth is a tool, not a weight, right?
Mm.
And so, with that, you talked about the weight of societal expectations, family expectations, societal assumptions. But when you say wealth as a tool, what do you mean by that, Chase?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, when you can use wealth as a tool to, better yourself and better the world, or you can almost use it as an identity and use it for more superficial, like material reasons, I guess, and kind of the wrong reasons. And I think a lot of inheritors do fall into that category because they don't really know anything different and the money is there for them. Really, using it as a tool versus like having it as a weight is like really figuring out your values and what it is you want to do, figuring out your purpose and taking action with that and using your wealth to support that versus, some of the more superficial things that money can provide. So, yeah.
So my question is, and this is just going to be your opinion, Chase. We see individuals receive inheritance, but my question to you is, why do so many people who inherit wealth maybe struggle emotionally, even though financially, like they're secure, like the worries aren't there, it's not over there, they're not having to look over their shoulder. But what is it with the emotional struggle that you've seen maybe in your family with some of your coaching clients?
Yeah. First things first that comes to mind is because no one talks about the emotional inheritance. It's not being talked about.
So let me ask you,
Yeah.
why do you think that's the case? Why isn't why that silent burden? Why aren't I mean, is it frowned upon? Do we not feel comfortable? Is it a taboo? What's your insight on that?
I think it's all of those things you mentioned, and it's the assumptions and stigmas that are pre-placed on this circumstance, right? Like you said, these are first world problems and 1% problems, right? So I think, it's definitely taboo, and there's expectations and guilt and identity crisis that comes with it. Um, I definitely think inheritance can like surface grief and family pressure and deep questions like, do I deserve this? Or who am I without struggle? And if there's no support or space to process that, people either like freeze, spend impulsively, or like disconnect entirely. Money alone doesn't give you direction. It's the meaning that does.
And I know that has been a huge part of your passion, your motivation, the driving force behind what you are doing. The question that I want to pose now is, we would typically see, and I mentioned this in your introduction, that maybe someone with the life experience early on from you, even at the age of 11, where they might go into just the traditional finance sector,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But for you, you believe, and your actions show it, and the life and what you're building with your clients really shows that the emotional side of wealth, the emotional side of money, could be more important than the money itself. So could you just talk about that emotional side of money and because a lot of time, Chase, we think we know about the emotional side of not having resources, of not
Hmm.
having wealth, of not having enough. But there is that other side of the coin of the emotions when you do have these things. Could you go a little bit deeper, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. Just speaking from my own experience, I think, there's like when you inherit money and when you do have these resources that you didn't necessarily work for, there's a void and there's a disconnect from the money. So like even though like you have this circumstance and it very much the emotional side of it can relate to the money, I often actually think it's disconnected, and it's disconnected because you're almost able to be disconnected from it and you're not concerned about money or all these things. So, it's something I experienced with my dad and my uncle. Two of the best people you would have ever met, the coolest, most humble, nicest people. And they struggled with addiction their entire life. They were trying to fill some sort of void. They never found their purpose, never found their true calling. Um, and they were lonely, and specifically with my dad, like he just had so much guilt and shame for just having it, because he didn't understand why one person right there that he could see was struggling on the street and didn't have food, and yet he's been given this like everything and he's never had to work. So it's a multi-layered onion, and I've seen it bring up every emotion that you can possibly
Yeah.
possibly imagine.
So, Chase, I want to ask you, you mentioned some of the ways that you saw some things show up or appear in your uncle, your father's life. So, if we're here, so as a coach now, and someone comes to you with your coaching clients, what are some of the signs, or how does that shame or that guilt, how does it show up? Because you mentioned we're not talking about it, right? So on the
Hmm.
outside, and ladies and gentlemen, I want to be clear that we see this more often than we know. We just don't know that it's happening in front of our eyes. So to the
Hmm.
untrained person, Chase, what does it look like? We might have wealthy friends. Maybe we have family members who have inherited an inheritance, and we're sitting there thinking that everything is good, or like the Lego movie, everything is awesome. Do you
Hmm.
see some common traits or characteristics that show up that might be indicators of shame or guilt or that disconnection that individuals have to deal with before they can heal?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, speaking, again, with my experience and my dad's experience, I think addiction is a big one. I see a lot of addiction and overindulgence in general, which could look like anything, overspending, oversleeping, Netflix, like over the use of Netflix or whatever. So overindulgence. I would also say like trying to prove their worth through performance, and like overworking or overachieving to justify that, their money, um and maybe trying to be impressive, and because they feel like they need to prove it to themselves and to the world. And then I guess the other one I would say too is like an over generosity, like feeling like the pressure to like pay for everything,
Yeah.
and like people come to you and ask to borrow money, and it's like, yeah, even though I'm stressed about money, because yes, inheritors do stress about money as well, like it's not like and of course every situation is different, every trust fund is different, but I think a lot of people tend to take advantage of inheritors and what it is that they have to offer, and that also creates a lot of isolation.
Yeah. All right. So I want to speak to Chase, the coach now, the trust fund coach.
Hmm.
Is there a common mindset or belief? So you're working with those inheritors who are sustaining their wealth and those maybe who have made some decisions or done some actions where it looks like they're squandering some of their resources, right? So
Hmm.
is there a common mindset or belief that separates those who are doing the right things from the wrong things?
Yeah, I think so. And again, with my own experience, I think oftentimes there's a core belief that, like money and abundance doesn't like only comes from one place and one place only. And that is their family wealth or their trust fund, and which immediately dismisses or, minimizes like that person's, I guess, dreams and calling and belief to follow that, if that makes sense. So I think the difference is really like a belief in themselves and a belief in um, what it is they're called to do and who they're called to help.
Got it. So now I believe so. Jim Rohn would often say that it's too bad failures don't give seminars because we can learn from those who have done it wrong, right?
Yes.
And so we want to not call anyone a failure, but what are some common mistakes that you may see with your coaching clients that some beneficiaries might be making? What are some common mistakes, some areas where you're like, hey, if you are a beneficiary, if you're inheriting wealth, avoid these three things. What might
Okay.
they be?
Yeah. First one I would say is a lack of getting involved and kind of ignoring it,
Hold on, stop
avoiding.
right there, Chase. So when you say a lack of getting involved, go deeper. Explain to us what that means.
Yeah. It's really avoiding your financial positioning and financial clarity, right? So
Yeah.
ignoring their numbers out of fear, out of guilt, out of overwhelm, right? And the fix is really to start small, track spending, understand what you own, what's coming in, what's going out, and then build confidence through that knowledge. The second thing I kind of briefly mentioned, but it would be more, you know, trying to prove their worth through performance, right? So overworking and overachieving to justify their money. And that, I think the shift there and the focus to kind of fix that is focus on being aligned and not just doing things for the, appearance or, of doing that thing, to be impressive, or that's what you should be doing.
Hmm.
And then I would say the third thing is really letting others or family and society writing your script for the life,
Wow.
their life. Like I think it's really important to ask, like, what do I actually want? And that's when you're going to see wealth is the most powerful, and that's when it's going to like service to your values, if that makes sense.
So, Chase, you are cutting your own path, leading your own journey. You're the leader, not the follower. How challenging is it? Because from the outside, we may be listening, we may be watching and saying, well, what do you mean, not let them set their expectations, put their expectations on you? How challenging is that for some of your clients or for you to say, well, I don't want to go the traditional route. I believe that here's what's in my heart, here's what's in my gut, in my head. This is the
Hmm.
path and route that I want to take. And knowing that those who are closest to you, traditionally family members, friends, they might not agree. Is that a difficult thing to do?
The most difficult, like it really does come down to like having that like radical self-belief and trusting yourself and following this calling and following your intuition. I think because of my early experience and my life experience, um, I was introduced to personal development and a lot of kind of really deep spiritual work at an early age. And so I've been blessed to be able to do quite a bit. I was introduced to personal development at 17, going to a Tony
Let's go,
Robbins
sir. Come
event
on. Early. I love it.
early. Yeah. And it wasn't actually until a handful of years later that I returned to it and was like, this makes sense. This is what I want to do. And I have some amazing mentors in the space. But yeah, I think, it does, it also it took me a lot of healing and all these alternative therapy programs and coaching and community to really like get the confidence to do it.
Okay, so I want to go a little bit down that path now because as someone who is into personal development, you have been in these I'm going to say lifestyles because you've had a number of different shifts from a young age.
Mhm.
And so I want to ask you from the familial, from the family standpoint, what are some healthy ways for families to talk about money? Because if we aren't talking about, if a lot of it is silent and a lot of it is unspoken, what are some healthy ways that families, whether it's the parents or kids or even siblings in your case, that we can talk about money, especially when there's an abundance of money? What have you seen are some
Yeah.
healthy ways to address it? Because we do see that we often hear about there's not enough money. No, you can't do this. Go out and get a job. We're struggling. But what are some healthy ways on the other side of that coin?
Yeah, that's a great question. Radical honesty and transparency. I would, start with curiosity and not control. Instead of jumping into numbers or the legal structures, like begin with the questions like, what does wealth mean to us? Or what kind of legacy do we want to leave? And create regular, like judgment free spaces to talk about it, right? Not just during a crisis or when it's time to talk about inheritance or it's time to talk to the attorneys, right? And don't wait to like perfect the language, just start. Like the more normalized the conversations are, the less fear and confusion there's going to be when it's time to talk about the more serious stuff and inheritance and attorneys and legal structures and all of that.
So you break this all down very simply. So you make something complex, something that is intimidating, simple for the rest of us to understand. And so you often talk about rewriting your money story. Rewriting your money story. What does that mean and what does that process look like?
Yeah. It starts with diving into your values. What are your
Now,
values?
right there, Chase, when you say values, you don't mean value. You're not talking about net worth.
Right.
You say values, plural, continue.
Yes. So really, really diving into, like what it is that they want to, or what it is you want to pass on and what it is you want to share and like what it is you value, not again, like value in like who you are, right? Aside from the money, aside from what it is you've been given, what you have or what you don't have. And really I think also looking into a big part of what I did to kind of rewrite my money story was becoming aware of past generations of their money story and what did they do well? Where did they make mistakes? Where are some of the generational themes popping up and occurring, right? And just actually having that realization and awakening that like you can end the cycle and you can change it and whatever has happened in the past or whatever decisions you've maybe made in the past or your future past generations have made, you can make different decisions and completely rewrite the story.
Now, someone today might be listening to Chase and Neil have this conversation, and maybe they're lost in luxury. They're lost in wealth right now. And I know you mentioned awareness. Awareness is key. We have to be aware. So, what might be a first step for someone who's trying to find meaning and fulfillment in the middle of this wealth?
I think feeling lost is totally normal. Like wealth definitely amplifies confusion. And if you don't have a clear purpose, you're definitely going to be confused. So my advice would be to start small and to be kind to yourself. And instead of fixing everything at once, focus on one area, like your values, as we talked about, or a passion project, or even a daily habit that brings meaning. And reach out for support, a coach, a community, a therapist, or a trusted friend who gets it. Because clarity does come from taking action and connection, not the isolation that is most likely occurring.
Now, you mentioned at the outset that Trust Your Trust Fund, it's really dedicated to your father. You saw the struggles, you experienced some things. Could you just share a little bit more for the audience that will encourage them to go and purchase the book themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I really did write the book for the inheritor and for like for myself, for like a resource the resource I was looking for and needed at that time. But I will say that regardless of your positioning and if you've inherited or if you're creating it for future generations, I think it's a really knowledgeable read. I think you're going to learn something. And especially for those who are setting up wealth, it's kind of something I'm talking more and more about and working with a handful of clients on is like setting it up consciously and what does that look like and how do you want to pass it on and thinking about the hidden curses and kind of more of the structure of passing it down. And I'm very lucky. I'm the youngest cousin. My sibling and I are the youngest of my dad's family who all inherited. And my grandmother, she was very smart and she watched how the money affected everybody else. So she structured our inheritance in a much different, much more manageable way.
Now, right there, could we just speak to, because I know you mentioned when someone is rewriting their money story, to go back and look at the previous money stories of generations. So grandma went and said, hold on, time out. I don't like what this did to my family. Let me do
Yeah.
things a little bit differently. So well intended, but also she said, hey, we're going to do something different. We're going to switch this up. Now, let me ask you, now knowing and seeing that things have been set up differently, what's your viewpoint and what's your appreciation to your grandmother for changing that generational theme?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I mean, I'm just grateful, it's one of those things that I feel like it's the biggest blessing and it's almost given me this opportunity that I've taken because I also often say that like part of my greatest blessing with my inheritance is that it's not an amount that's going to carry me through life, at least with the lifestyle that I'm accustomed to and that I desire for myself. So I've known that I need to figure out how to create something for myself versus like being told like what my dad and his siblings were told of you never have to work again. Like no matter what, you will be taken care of. And I think that it's a whole different psychological, mind messer.
And that has been your work. I would like to say your life's work. And people say, man, he's still a baby. But you're doing great work. Trust Your Trust Fund is an absolute must read for those inheritors who find themselves in that space of what do I do now? So I want to ask you, knowing what you know, what advice would you give to a new inheritor or someone who could potentially inherit wealth when it comes to handling their money with purpose?
Yeah, I would say that your money story isn't set in stone and it's not up to anyone else to write that story or create that story. It's completely up to you and you have the power to rewrite it at any moment. Start by noticing like the beliefs you've inherited and start to gently question them. And then, choose the stories that serve your growth and your purpose. And just you have to remember that wealth is a tool and it's not your identity, and you get to decide what it means for you.
I absolutely love it. So before I go to my final question, I do want you to just share with the audience, where can they find out more about Chase Collins, what you're doing, about your book, your coaching services? Where can we go?
Yep. All social media handles are Trust Fund Coach. Pretty simple. My website is thetrustfundcoach.com, and all book resources are on there or on trustyourtrustfund.com.
I absolutely love it. So I have one question, one serious question for you, and then we're going to have some fun, Chase. So you're doing this work, and you mentioned that wealth is going to be a tool for you. It is not going to be your identity. You are not going to make that a weight, and that's your hope, goal, prayer for those who inherit as well. What legacy do you hope to leave when you're no longer here?
Oof, good question. I want to leave the legacy of um, starting the conversation around it and the awareness and hopefully just leave behind like a library of resources and tools for future generations to reference and to learn from. another big part of why I'm doing what I'm doing and what I say is if every inheritor used their money for good and went and helped whoever they were called to help in whatever capacity they were called to do it in, the world would be a different place. It really is the difference between this great divide that we're seeing. And yeah, so I think that's it.
So, Chase, I want to say something to you, and this is going to be challenging and hopefully encouraging at the same time. But for you to be the initiator, for you to be the first, for you to want to be the one who's starting the conversation, I know it comes with a responsibility, but I hope and pray that you are enjoying the fact that you're walking in your calling, that you are starting a necessary conversation. And it's not a first world problem. These are real struggles that real people, real spirits, real human beings are dealing with. And just knowing that we have someone that is open to having a conversation out loud is going to empower so many people. So thank you for that. I am excited to follow,
Thank you.
support. We'll be following Chase's journey with Trust Your Trust Fund. He mentioned that his goal, his dream is to have a library. That means there's a lot more to come, ladies and gentlemen. So Chase, now I want to have some fun. Are you open to it, sir?
Yes, sir. Always.
All right, so we're going to do some rapid fire questions. I did not let you know this was coming. And so just give me your honest answer. I do want to go on record as saying you are not legally obligated to answer any of these questions. Okay, so don't say
Alrighty.
that I coerced you into it. Are you ready,
All
Chase?
right. I'm ready.
Favorite color?
Blue.
Why?
The sky.
He's a man because that's where I'm going. I'm going to a new stratosphere, baby.
Yeah,
Favorite
yeah.
food?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I can answer that. I love Mexican food. I love sushi. I love burgers,
Now
steaks.
hold on. So you're all across the board.
I'm all across the board. I can't. I eat everything. I can't
Okay.
pick a favorite.
So for you, let's try something different. Ladies and gentlemen, this is
Yeah.
a Beyond the Velvet Rope first. Least favorite food.
Least favorite food.
If you saw it on a
I
buffet, you would skip over it every single time.
the
So
I can't even think of food I don't like.
I know you're young. The old commercials where they said, "Give it to Mikey, he'll eat it." So I'm changing your
Hmm.
name from Chase to Mikey. You're willing to try pretty much everything.
Yeah, I try everything.
I love it, man. Okay, Mickey Mouse or Bugs Bunny?
Mickey.
Why?
I think my generation.
Okay, fair enough. Superman or
Yeah,
Batman?
Batman.
Quick answer. Why?
Just always been a big Batman fan. I got to watch them film Dark Knight while I was in Chicago a little bit. I got to see all the Batmobiles. I saw them up on the buildings. It was a cool experience. I saw them, if you're familiar with the Dark Knight, I got to see them flip the semi.
Come on, man.
So it was, and I've always been a big Batman fan.
And,
But I
and
like
so it
Superman too. I like Marvel.
so it was part of you, right? He's sitting here like, man,
Yeah,
dude, I was there when they were filming the movie,
yeah,
so it's a part of who I am. I
yeah,
love
yeah.
it, man. What is one movie that you must watch every time it's on?
Probably, I think the original Happy Gilmore.
Really? So have you seen two?
Yeah,
And so I have not seen it. Your thoughts? Were you pleasantly surprised?
I didn't
Oh,
like it.
man. So that's why. So Adam Sandler, when you're watching this, don't hold it against Chase. He's just saying,
Yeah,
come on. He felt like you
yeah,
could have given him a little bit more.
yep.
All right. What is one talent that you don't have that you wish you did?
Like musical. I would love to I wish I was more musical. You don't have, I can't sing.
Wait, now hold on. Now, see, listen, Chase, let's not say what you can't do until you demonstrate it. So, the audience, we are going to hear a live performance by
No way.
Mr. It's not happening?
It's not happening.
Okay, 'cause see, listen, I want to make space for us to have this conversation, right?
I love
Chase
it.
is like,
I
Chase is like, nah, Neil, just take my word for it. So let me ask you, are you a shower singer at all? Or are you in the car with the tunes blasting and singing out loud, or are you just humming like, hmm?
it depends. It depends. I think it depends. A
Okay.
little bit of both.
All right. What is one thing you cannot live without?
I would say probably like Dove bar soap.
Chase, Dove bar soap. Serious.
Dove bar soap. Yep. Basic.
Hey, dude. Now that
And of course, water.
Hey, of course, I see the water. The water is happening. But Dove Bar Soap is the most unique. So, congratulations, sir. You really are
Thank you.
leading the unexpected conversation. So, do we have that Dove Bar Soap endorsement deal in play yet or not?
Not yet, but it's in the works.
Okay, it better be in the works because if you're shouting them
Yep.
out of everything you can't live without and it's Dove Bar Soap, I
I know.
absolutely love it. So, men, remember, we need to care about our skin and our freshness as well. You heard it here from Chase Collins. And then
Yep.
the final question that I want to ask, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh, I would say, like being radically authentic to myself, like regardless of what other people think, and just trusting that, and, I've been given a lot of good advice, but I definitely, I've had some amazing people in my corner that have helped me, be able to truly believe it and embody that.
So I lied to you, Chase, and audience, I apologize. You've mentioned your mentors, your coaches, you've mentioned your circle that have allowed you and given you space to grow and learn.
Mhm.
What does life look like without those people in your life?
Definitely more confusing, maybe a little like less clarity on direction. And also just, I always like say like follow somebody who's already done it, and that doesn't mean like, do exactly what they're doing and copy what they're doing, but definitely like have someone to look up to and like kind of follow after, even if you are creating your own lane and your own niche, kind of like what I've done. Um and yeah, it's been more than helpful.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you have a coach, that you have mentors, that you have confidants in your circle. Sounding boards, it makes all the difference. You can go and follow Chase Collins on everything he does. His contact info, all of the handles are going to be in the show notes. Make sure you purchase your copy of Trust Your Trust Fund today, especially if you are an inheritor, so that you can get in contact with the Trust Fund coach. He is leading the way, opening and starting new conversations. So it was an honor and a privilege to have you here on Beyond the Velvet Rope. We're going to leave you like we always do, and that is with the reminder that we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time I see you or you see me, don't be average, be world renowned. Peace.